In this video, we're going to go over some best practices around group management. These are tips for you as you develop your application and designs to make sure that you're positioning everything properly within your layouts. You're going to be using group elements and containers in general quite frequently throughout your designs because those dictate the layouts and positioning of all of your visual elements. They have important responsive settings that really start at that level of the hierarchy, right? The parent containers will dictate how the elements inside of them are positioned within the parent, but overall on the page as well. Okay, now consider an application that has grown in size and there's many visual elements on the screen. If you start to move things around, you want to group new elements together or ungroup things, it can be very easy to place something in the wrong position and you end up with behavior that you're not wanting. So Bubble has a few different indicators and helpful guides to make sure that you are putting things where you want. It might not seem obvious on a screen like this where there are very few elements and it's really easy to target the container that you want to move something inside of or move it out. But again, as applications grow and you have more elements on the page, you have more nesting, there are containers that are a lot closer together. These kinds of tips here are going to be much more helpful for you to ensure you're doing everything properly. So we're going to be leveraging the elements tree, some highlighting that happens here in the canvas, as well as this grid and borders menu here. Let's start with just the basic concept of adding an element to a container. If I click on the text element here so that I can add it to my page, before I take my next step, notice how my cursor has changed into a crosshairs icon, right? It's not the normal select icon that we see up here. In fact, if I wanted to leave this mode, right now I'm about to drop the text, but if I don't want to do that, I can click on the icon back here and I'm back in my regular select mode and I can click all of my elements like that. So back to the text here, notice that as I hover over my various containers on the screen, we get various shading and highlighting and little lines that show up. So I'm going to explain what all of those are. The first one is this red highlight that you see around the borders of the container. Okay, so there's one there. That's my white container, my group, and then here's another group, the big rectangle. It doesn't have a background color, but it does have a border color, and it's kind of being overtaken by the red highlight. Okay, so Bubble is showing me the boundaries of that group. In fact, I'm going to go back to my select, and I'm actually going to remove the colored border that I've styled here on this group so that this becomes even more apparent, because you'll likely have cases where your groups are transparent to the user, and so we won't see them here. So if I take a text and hover over, now that highlight really shows me those boundaries to make sure I understand where this text is going to be placed. Okay, now the page also counts as a container. It's basically one giant container. So if I'm hovering over something where there's no other container involved, you see the left and the right sides of my page, those are now highlighted in red. Okay, so that just tells me which container the text is going to be inside of. The next highlighting is this one that we're seeing here, this purple blue highlight that's showing me all of the nonents of this white group. So the white group is set to a layout style of align to parent, which means that the elements inside, they are positioned in one of 9 spaces. Okay, and so that's what Bubble is highlighting for me for that container type, that layout type. You're not going to see this for the rows or columns type. Okay, so if I go to the center here and I draw my text, I know that's exactly where it's going to be positioned and nowhere else. I can then pick it up. If I wanted to move it to a different nonent, I can do that. Right? Or if I wanted to place this, inside of, let's say this group here, this rectangle group is also an align to parent. And so, if I drop it in that left-hand nonent, that's specifically in the group, not in the repeating group, right? And it's in the middle left section there. Okay. And so that's where that text is positioned. Now, for any groups that are set to a row or column layout style, like this one here, this group inside of my cell is set to a row, then Bubble's going to show me those vertical lines to show me the position of this text in the horizontally stacking row. I can go to the front of the row if I drop it there, or to the back of the row, or anywhere in between. Okay, now I'm going to change this group up here to a column to show you the opposite with the column. We now see a horizontal line to show me where that text will be positioned, right? If I drop it there, it's at the top of the column, the middle of the column, okay? So this is if I want to visually move, drag my elements around and drop them directly on my canvas. Those are the highlighting tools that help me understand where things are going. Now, since I'm here on the canvas, I want to point out a very helpful guideline for you, literally lines here, which is this setting here, show element borders. So remember this this rectangle group that has no visual border for the user. Of course, when I hover over it, Bubble's going to show me that boundary just by hovering over it, but I can maintain those boundaries by turning on this checkbox. Okay, now all of the boundaries of every single element, this is not just for containers now, it's for every single element. You can see the boundaries of the text, the images, the repeating group, even the buttons. Now they are always present. The user doesn't see this. This is just a tool for you when you're working in the editor here, but this can also be a very helpful thing to have enabled so that, again, when you're moving things around, you just get a super clear indication of where things are going to land, okay? A couple of other helpful settings here. I mean, of course, you have grids that you can turn on to help you with more pixel perfect spacing and positioning if you're used to grids. If you come from a design background, I know a lot of web designers are very comfortable with having a grid kind of a part of their canvas. Again, it's not something that shows to the user, it's just for you to help your designs come together. And you can also change the colors of these boundaries. So I like to choose a color that is different from the red, really honestly anything other than red, because that red is going to show me if I'm hovering, if I'm about to drop something into that group. So I don't want to confuse that color with the regular boundary borders here that show up. So if I do like a blue or a purple, sometimes I go with yellow or green, but anything that's not red is typically going to make it easier for you to find. All right, so now let's take a look at our other tool here, which is our elements tree. Of course, the elements tree is a way for us to see all of the elements in their hierarchy, but it is an interactive section of the editor to help you move things around and change the positioning and even change the nesting. So take a look at my two buttons here, categories and show pop-up. I'm actually going to change the style of one of them to make them a little bit more obvious. Let's do this success button. That way we have a purple and a green button. And I'm going to add some gap spacing in my column. Let's do some 30 pixel spacing, and I'm going to center these just to make it a little easier to work with. All right, so in our elements tree, I have my group with buttons, and I'm going to open that up, and I can pick up these texts, the labels for the elements, and drag them around, and it will reposition for me, because again, everything is now in a very structured row or column, left to right, top to bottom sequence. And so dragging them around here will reflect, it will mirror that sequence in your canvas. So I just moved the show pop-up button above categories in the list here, and so visually it's going to do the same thing there. I can also pull this button out. I can move this inside of my group with repeating group. Okay, that's that big, that rectangle group with no background color. And if I hover over the group, you see that the entire group section is highlighted. Again, that tells me that it's going to drop it inside of the group. I'm not inside of the repeating group's inner group. That's this one here. I'm at the outer group level. So I'll drop it there, and you see how it just placed it in the first nonent of that align to parent positioning, okay? And so again, I can continue to move this maybe inside of the repeating group, outside of the group, right? You see how it's kind of behind it there, or inside of the group, and it placed itself at the end of the row. I can shift it around within the row, okay? So this is a very handy alternative to repositioning your elements, especially when you have a lot of elements on the screen, you have a lot of nesting, and you want to be very careful and specific with where things go. This is very helpful for that, especially when some elements might be hidden by default, you might not have them all visible, and so on. So I'm going to grab this and put this back into my group with buttons. There we go. So those are really the primary settings available to you for managing your groups. Keep in mind that with the elements tree, you can also turn things on and off. This is again for you only in the canvas. That doesn't affect your users. You can also turn this setting on to reveal any elements that are hidden by default. So right now there's only 2 of them on this page. We have a pop-up and we have a group focus element. Those elements by nature are going to be hidden by default always because they are ones where you have to show them via a workflow. But any element that you choose to turn off its default visibility. So for example, let's take this group and turn off the setting visible on page load. Now the group is one of these hidden elements where I'd have to create a condition or a workflow to make it visible. Okay, so I'll turn that back on. So those are your settings. Keep that in mind, the interactive elements tree, the highlighting of the boundaries of all of your containers, the highlighting of the nonents when you move them around. This isn't a nonent anymore. This one is out here in this rectangle. And also the horizontal and vertical lines when you're working with containers that are set to rows and columns. And of course, any of your grid and border settings just to help you see, again, your canvas, the overall layout of your grid for your page. All right, everyone, we'll see you in the next video.